Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's SSTI webinar titled Measuring Accessibility, Planning for Success. In terms of housekeeping, the session is being recorded, so if you're interested, look for it in a couple of days on our website, ssti.us. We'll ask that you type any questions you may have into the Q&A feature, and we'll get to as many as time allows once we've heard from all of our presenters. For those of you who don't know, SSTI, the State Smart Transportation Initiative, is a project of both the University of Wisconsin and Smart Growth America. And we work to promote transportation practices that advance environmental sustainability and equitable economic development while maintaining high standards of governmental efficiency and transparency. And we do that in three ways. First, we have our community of practice, which is a forum for state DOT leaders to share challenges, best practices, and additional content with leaders from other states. We offer research and technical assistance to agencies who are interested in what we have to offer. And the third feature is knowledge sharing, which we're doing today with this webinar. We also publish a blog examining applications of current research, trends in travel behavior, and other transportation and land use issues that our audience might find interesting. If you're interested, sign up for our newsletter at ssti.us. We'll also be circulating a survey after this webinar. So if you wouldn't mind taking that, let us know what you liked about it, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see in the future. Quick plug for our accessibility guidebook that we published not too long ago, Measuring Accessibility. I anticipate that most folks on this call have some familiarity with accessibility, also called access to destinations or access to opportunities. We're at kind of a unique moment with accessibility. This graph shows the number of articles published in the academic press lately. You can see sort of an exponential growth happening these days as accessibility moves from sort of the theoretical realm to the more practical realm, and then on to an application phase where it becomes more possible for practitioners to use it in their various practices. Here's an example of accessibility that many of you are probably familiar with. We can add, in this instance, we've added pedestrian crossings over a highway, and then we can measure the increase in accessibility for the households on the other side of the highway, accessing the points of interest on the other side. That's one example. We're also seeing additional adoption of accessibility at the state level. This example from Virginia, the Smart Scale program, uses accessibility to allow projects that include infrastructure for active modes to be competitive in a way that they couldn't otherwise be. Today, we're going to hear from a group of practitioners at the city and metropolitan planning organization levels about the opportunities they enjoy and the challenges they may face when using accessibility in their planning practices, including such topics as leveraging accessibility in planning tools, using accessibility results in grant writing, showing how accessibility can be used in project analysis and selection, predicting project benefits with accessibility, and also engaging decision makers and interested groups. As luck would have it, we're getting a bit of a West Coast, Mountain West perspective today. We'll be hearing from Julie Bjornstad and Brett Gramberg with Wasatch Front Regional Council, and Darren Conley with the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, and then Kim Venegas from the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. And with that, I will pass the baton to our first speakers, Julie and Bert.
Great, thanks. Yes, I'm Julie Bjornstead. I have Bert with me and the Wasatch Front Regional Council you saw on the last slide, but we're the MPO for the Salt Lake and Ogden urbanized areas here in northern Utah. And today we'll just give you an overview of our impact tool we created to look at how individual projects are impacting access to opportunities. We'll start with an introduction to our ATO lens, and then dive into the details about the impacts tool. So Michael gave a great introduction to access to opportunity. I assume we all know what we're talking about here, but just so we're all on the same page, when W4C talks about access to opportunity, we're really looking at the combination of mobility or speed of travel, and then proximity or how far apart our destinations are. These two aspects taken together is how we define accessibility, or the ease of reaching key destinations. So we prefer at W4C to use ATO as a goal than vehicle hours of travel or delay. One reason is that ATO is more positive. We're working towards a more positive outcome. That's something that people can we can get consensus behind, and it's a bit easier to have conversations about than using vehicle hours of travel or delay, which is focused on that reduction. In addition, ATO allows us to look at solutions that are both transportation and land use oriented, whereas on the vehicle hours of travel or delay side, it's just looking through that transportation lens, and so we really are losing the community from the conversation when we just focus on congestion metrics. So this allows us to focus not just on those capacity or widening projects, but look at other things like how can we develop more mixed use centers, enhance our existing centers, add housing to our commercial centers to make our destinations closer together and improve our access to opportunities. And then here in Utah, ATO has really become part of the conversation. All of our MPOs, UDOT, and our major transit authority uses access opportunity when we talk about how our long-range transportation plans are, the benefits of our long-range transportation plans. Our DOT has incorporated access to opportunity and its prioritization for state funding for both transit, roadways, and active transportation. And then we as the MPO use access to opportunities throughout our planning and programming decisions. But in order to get to that level of buy-in, we took a four-pronged approach. First, there was a lot of conversations at the leadership level, trying to get acceptance to moving away from traditional congestion measures towards ATO. This included buy-in and conversations at the transportation agency level, on our boards and committees, and then through our local communities. Part of those conversations, we realized we had to solve the communication aspect. How can we talk about ATO to stakeholders in a way that makes sense? Can we say jobs, points, percent, raw numbers? Sometimes those numbers don't mean anything, and we needed to understand how we can communicate. We also needed to talk about how we can incorporate them into decision making. So for instance, project prioritization, when we're talking about funding decisions or planning decisions. And all of those things can only happen if we support our technical analysis and build those capabilities. So Bert is going to give a little introduction to those technical capabilities and then introduce the tool as well.
Okay, you can hear me, but you can't see me because I can't share my video yet, but maybe that'll get fixed. Bert Granberg with the Analytics Group at Wasatch Front Regional Council. And I'm going to start just by talking about one of our first forays into sharing the landscape of access to opportunities up and down the Wasatch Front. And that was a project that SSTI was involved with going back a few years. And we're basically using our travel demand model to compute accessibility for auto and transit, both from the perspective of households, but also from the perspective of employers and businesses. And we're looking at how very workplace focused measure, which is like how many jobs are within a typical commute, or how many households are within a typical commute of a business. And we can do this because we're working with our regional travel demand model. We can look at the existing landscape and what the future landscape looks like when planned projects are built. And then, of course, one of the things that we like to look at, this will come up a little bit later when Julie comes back on, but we've designated equity focus areas, doing some census block group analysis, and we like to put the access to opportunities, outcomes, and metrics together with these equity focus areas to look specifically at neighborhoods that have been historically underserved, to see how well the road system and the transit system are working in those areas. Just a couple quick overview of some of the other things that we've done to help communicate the ATO landscape. We've got a web page that provides access to a lot of the things we're going to see today. And that includes that sort of basic overview of the landscape of current and future ATO and our ATO web map. We have a regional housing suitability map that uses ATO to look at the comparative advantages of different locations for new housing up and down the region. And we've built these resources into our sort of vision style, everything in one map that lets people look at transportation and land use and the vision for what the region looks like in the future. And then the last thing I'll mention is that we're working on a video, it's about a 4-minute video that explains the concept of access opportunities and talks about some of the efforts that we're involved with to employ the concept in our planning work. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to start looking in at this specific tool that we built about a year and a half ago that we call the ATO project level impact tool. And I'm going to introduce the sort of what and how we went about building this tool. And then Julie's going to come back and tell us about how specifically we're using it in regional planning efforts. So the purpose of the ATO impact tool was to come up with a lightweight method that could estimate project level ATO impacts using desktop software quickly, and also could work at a variety of different project scales. So a quick sketch, we wanted to be able to come up with some metrics that we could compare different projects and different project types. We wanted to look regionally as well as in our equity focus areas. And we wanted the result of this tool to be intuitive and very relatable. We wanted to run fast, and we want it to be more or less an open source product. So I like to think about this as the classic design dilemma, where with a bicycle, you can have a light bike, a durable bike, or a cheap bike. You can have 2 of those, but you can't have all 3 at once. Similarly, for the ATO tool and the ATO analysis, you can have cheap and fast tools. You can look at behavioral dynamics and the complexity of travel decision-making. You can look at projects of all sizes. You can't do all that and have it under one package. So for this tool specifically, we're looking at cheap, fast, and then a wide range of project sizes, and at the exclusion of some of the complexities that you'll see in a travel demand model. So the ATO impact tool is able to analyze all 4 of the project types that are shown: auto, transit, cycling, and importantly, land use impacts. So we can look at things like the addition of lanes or a new interchange, new transit services, or transit service improvements, different bicycling facilities that could be added in and analyzed, but then also the addition of things like centers where we've got job density or household density increasing. Our solution is built on Esri's ArcGIS Pro and uses the Jupyter Notebooks Python environment together with the Network Analyst extension. You're going to see TravelShed examples in a second. The advantage of the Jupyter Notebook tool is that we've integrated the documentation about what the tool is doing and how to run it into the notebook, so people can sort of follow along. with the instructions as they go. We've open sourced the Python code in our WFRC GitHub site, and happy to share and discuss how others might use it. And it's fast. It takes about somewhere between 5 to 20 minutes per project to run the really complicated travel shed analysis. And we can run individual transportation improvements, but we can also run transportation improvements in combination with different land use scenarios. Key inputs to the ATO impact tool are our regional socioeconomic forecast. So our household and job forecast at the traffic analysis zone level through 2050. So we can run the tool and look at the benefits in any year in that series. We also have a multimodal GIS-based network that's maintained by our DOT and then our state GIS office in collaboration with the counties who are adding new roads to the statewide database on a monthly basis. And that multimodal network has a basic travel cost for every segment of the network for auto travel, transit, and bike and pedestrian travel. And the third input I've mentioned are the equity focus areas, where we're sort of looking specifically to see how portions of the region are impacted that we're looking to improve conditions and maybe a little bit faster than the rest of the region. So how does the tool work? The basic concept is that you have a baseline network and you calculate access to opportunity, workplace access to opportunity for every single traffic analysis zone in the region. And that's your base. And then you copy that base and add in the project modification. So there's a little bit of GIS editing involved. And then you rerun the ATO calculations to create the results, which is the difference in ATO or the impact of the project. And just to visualize this a little bit, this is looking at a travel shed, one of the many travel sheds that gets created, in this case for a transit project in the Ogden area. We're calculating a baseline travel shed, looking out the distance of a typical transit commute in this case, for every single traffic analysis zone in the region. So, and then we add the project in and we redo the travel shed calculation. As you can see, it expands in this example. So we're doing this for each and every traffic analysis zone in the region, which is about 3,000 zones, and then summing up the results. And that's basically what the summary ATO benefit is based on. It's looking out from all the traffic analysis zones to see how each one of them improves because of the project. And one obvious benefit of having this fine-grained result is that we can see where the access to workplace gains are being made the most from the project, and link those to the equity focus areas. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Julie, and she's going to talk about more specifically about how to use this in our long-range planning analysis.
Great, thanks, Bert. Yeah, so if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so for each one of our modes that we plan in our regional transportation plan, whether that's active transportation, roadway, transit, we use a set of criteria when we're doing our needs-based phasing before we financially constrain our plan. And each mode has its own set of criteria. One of the criteria that is similar across the modes is the access to opportunity, access to educational and economic opportunities. Or if you just click again, yeah. And so for each project in the plan, we're looking at how that individual project is impacting regional access opportunities as well as focused access opportunities on equity focus areas. And I don't know if we defined those earlier, but essentially those are areas where there's high concentrations of poverty or low income, and then a minority of populations. But if you click, we have over 400 roadway and transit projects, about 1,000 active transportation projects. So to do project level ATO impacts through travel demand modeling, for instance, would take quite a long time. And so that's really where this tool was created and where one of the major benefits of the tool comes in. We can look at for each project that we run through the tool, we can look at both how it's impacting the region, and then we can define certain TASs that we're interested in looking at those specific TASs. Bert showed you some maps of what that can look like. Well, we can also get down into the details of how that access has changed over time, and as well as for what specific populations that looks like. So if you go to the next slide, Bert. So when we talk about the equity focus areas, or really any of those TAS-based outcomes, it's marrying the results that we're getting at the individual TAS level with, in our case, we're adding in census data. It's looking at where those populations that have low income are, and then we can come up with this access to jobs for our equity focus areas. But that can be whatever you want to define it as. And Bert may have mentioned earlier that one of the reasons we went to this build our own model instead of using some of the tools that are already available, like Sugar Access, is really being able to customize the geographies that we're looking at, being able to customize the time frame that we're looking at, so we can look more easily into the future for things like our long range planning. And then I'll show you what the outcomes look like from the tool. So essentially you have a table like this that would be all of your scenarios that you've run. And you can see that breakout between how it's improved access on the household side, on the job side, and then we combine that into a total access to opportunity score. We can also look at the individual elements of what we call our equity focus areas. And so this really allows us to see what projects are helping whom. Are these more focused on helping households access jobs or vice versa? And then sometimes we see regional benefits that don't necessarily help our equity focus areas as much as maybe another project that has fewer regional benefits. But one of the reasons that I think this is a really powerful tool is it's a really good way of being able to compare projects across different modes. So for this project, for this set of projects anyways, you see that this widening on 56 South, which is a road project, has a lot of increased access opportunity, doesn't do a lot for our equity focus areas. But you see that Penn Avenue buffered bike lane on the bottom, compared to the other two transit projects, actually improves access to opportunity more, even more so than the BRT project, which is under construction right now. But you can see that BRT project has benefits across the board, whether that's for the region or for our specific poverty and minority locations. So, Bart, if you go to the next slide, we can kind of wrap up here and talk about just some of the key observations that we found as we developed the tool and have been using it. First, this is a relatively simple tool. For example, I'll focus on the transit aspect. Right now, we are not including a headway or transfer penalty when we run access opportunities on the transit side. That's something we can build in later, and we've been thinking about how we could do that. But it helps keep the analysis time low to not have those. We also don't look at, on the bike analysis, the different types of users. So we're defining sort of a typical user on the bike analysis. And then, but having some of these kind of drawbacks maybe allows us to be able to edit the network, add new projects, perform the calculations pretty fast, especially compared to running a travel demand model, for instance. Right now, our focus is on the workplace access opportunities. We've been talking about building in different types of amenities, whether that's, for instance, parks and open space. And then through the tool, we've also seen that sometimes it is possible to decrease ATO, primarily when we are working with transit routes and we're either replacing multiple routes with a single refined route or shortening a route. And this is where maybe that transit not including the headways is an issue. sometimes we're reducing the route but increasing the frequency, and we're not seeing a benefit on the ATO side from that in our tool. Bert, do you have anything to add before we switch over?
No, that's good.
Here are some resources. That's Bert and mine's email, and then our ATO page is just wrc.org/ATO, and from there you can access the tool, look at what we've done prior, and also access our equity and WRC planning page.
Thank you, Julie and Bert. Nice, slick-looking tool with a lot of functionality and room to grow. So nice, nice. Our next speaker is Darren Conley with Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Let me pass the baton to you, Darren.
All right, thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I will put this over to there and set this to presentation mode. All right, am I looking good? Michael? Hello?
I don't think we're seeing your screen yet.
Okay. Let me wait. Oh, okay. I need to actually hit the share button. Two-step process. Is that looking better?
Much better. Thank you.
All right. Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for passing the baton. I'm going to talk today about some of the examples that SACOG has been using access to destinations as a metric for in both at a plan level as well as a project level. I've tended to use the term access to destinations a little bit more often than accessibility. For this audience today, consider them interchangeable, but I like to sometimes use access to destinations just because I end up confusing people for ADA accessibility. But anyway, I'll start with how we sort of use it at a plan level. So as a metropolitan planning organization, basically like a Wasatch Front, every several years we have to create a metropolitan transportation plan. And our metropolitan transportation plan looks about 20 years into the future, and it makes a lot of assumptions about population, jobs, land use patterns, and changes in the transportation system, like new road projects, transit projects, etc. The plan has a lot of policy goals that it measures against. These goals include, reducing vehicle miles traveled, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, making non-driving modes more attractive. And accessibility is a core consideration of a lot of these goals. So one of the things we really look at is we try to answer the question, if we execute all of the forecasted transportation projects and land use developments that are in our plan, how will that change access to jobs by transit and by driving? And then also for whom will it change access? These are a couple of charts that come from our currently adopted regional plan, and it shows how access to jobs changes between the base year and the plan horizon year, and it also compares it for environmental justice communities versus non-environmental justice communities. If you look at the chart on the left, it shows change in jobs accessible by transit for both in the base year, which at the time was 2016, then also if we execute all the transit plans in the metropolitan plan, how accessibility will change. And we had pretty optimistic assumptions about how transit would increase. So you see a pretty significant increase in the jobs accessible by transit. And there's also, it shows a change in jobs accessible within a 30-minute drive. And this is all based off of our travel demand model. So it's using our SACSIM models, transit network and highway network, and sort of getting a worker weighted average. TAZs are the zones, traffic analysis zones are the geography that we use, and this is the worker weighted average accessibility for the plan. It's fairly basic. I'm hoping we can have a little bit more richness in the future, but this is what we in the past reported at sort of a plan level for accessibility. A little more recently, in the past few years, we've been incorporating accessibility as a component of project level applications. And some of the programs that we include in which we consider accessibility to project level are for transportation projects at a regional funding round. And then we also use it to evaluate land use projects. Just starting last year, we have a program called Green Means Go that in which we, on a competitive basis, award money to housing development projects for infill housing or affordable housing. And we want to prioritize those funding for housing that's in areas that have relatively high multimodal accessibility. In evaluating, the next few slides I show will be a couple of examples of sort of the report outputs that we use in the tool that we use for both transportation and for housing projects. So for example, this is a arterial project, complete streets project that we evaluated, and it shows that the sort of bluish bars show how accessibility changes by each mode, and it also compares it to what's normal for that sort of area type and also for the region as a whole. So for example, focusing on 30-minute walk, this project has, if you're at the project location, you can walk to about 6,900 jobs in 30 minutes. This project was on sort of a suburban arterial. From the typical suburban area in the region, you can walk to about 5,300 jobs. So compared to other suburban arterial locations in the region, this project has moderately higher walk accessibility to jobs. And then it has significantly higher walk accessibility to jobs than what's typical for the region as a whole, which is not surprising because there are a lot of rural areas in the region with very low walk accessibility. We don't just look at jobs, we also look at services like, services is kind of a catch-all term for parks, K through 12 schools, libraries, hospitals, grocery stores, etc. All the stuff that we go to on a semi-regular basis that's not our jobs. And you can see the numbers are considerably lower because this is looking at establishments rather than jobs. And for this same project, you can see that walking and biking, this project has comparable but slightly lower accessibility to services, walk and bike accessibility to services than what's normal for this area, and about the same as what's normal or the average for the region as a whole. And kind of give some policy context for like a land use project. Knowing these accessibility numbers is useful to kind of see if we subsidize housing to get constructed here, we're going to be subsidizing housing that's in an area of lower or greater accessibility. And we want to subsidize housing in areas where if people live there, they're less likely to rely on a car to access their job or services. One other metric we use, which is not directly accessibility per se, but is sort of capturing one of the same policy goals of it, is a mix index. So we look at the area within 1 mile of a project, and we look at the mix of different land uses, like the balance of jobs and households and services within a mile of the project. And basically the idea is that if you have a value of 1, you have a really good mix of households to jobs and services. Like if you're that means if a project has a score of 1, it would mean that's in an area where if somebody's there, they can access a lot of daily needs within a mile of their household. And more recently, one thing that's been useful is that because both the housing and transportation funding programs are competitive, we really like to look at the how they compare to other projects, right? We get 100, 150 projects, we can only award maybe half that. So we, in addition to kind of looking at detailed data on accessibility for each project individually, we also have this roll-up tool, which this is just a screenshot of it, that can kind of compare accessibility from each project location and compare it to how it is for other projects. So for the project highlighted in yellow, we're interested to say, well, how does this project's access to services by transit compare to other projects? So that's just a kind of quick overview of how we've used accessibility for both plan and project level. The biggest limitation of what our current practice is that we're not showing how a project will change access to destinations. It's more contextual. What's the accessibility like now? And while that has a lot of value especially for housing project evaluation, it's less useful for evaluating transportation projects, because the whole idea of a transportation project is you want to increase accessibility, so you want to show that change. Part of the reason we haven't done that in the past is that the software we were using for accessibility analysis was very clunky to code in changes and took about 45 minutes to an hour just to run per project. So it just wasn't scalable for a effort where we have to process several hundred projects in a short amount of time. We have recently procured a different platform that is much faster and much easier to use. And now it's in the future will be feasible to compute that. So that's about all of it for now. These are some of the links if you want to look at the project level tool and kind of see not just the accessibility metrics, but also the many other metrics that we use in project performance evaluation. And then the link to the regional plan homepage also, that's where I got the plan level charts from. And then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Some great work there. Nice to hear about. Our third speaker of the day from the Los Angeles Department of Transportation is Kim Venegas. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Today, I'll present about the LDOT connectivity platform and how we use this tool to analyze and prioritize transportation projects. So here's the agenda for today. I will go over the why, what, and how of the connectivity platform. LADOT invested in the connectivity platform to analyze and prioritize projects for the city's mobility plan for 2035. We use the connectivity platform to quickly sketch out possible changes to the network and run simulations to determine how the changes would impact people's access to opportunities such as jobs, schools, hospitals, and grocery stores. A quick overview of how the tool works is that a planner draws their project, selects the travel mode such as bike, walk, or drive, adds the factors they want to study, such as specific populations and destinations like children's and parks. And then the platform produces a geometry and a table that indicates how the project changes access to those factors. The tool simulates the change in access the project would bring by allowing planners to adjust the bike time and walk time factors, the bike level, of traffic stress and car speeds. For example, if a planner predicts that the bike lane they want to build would make travel about 20% faster down the corridor, they would input a bike factor of 0.8 to reflect that. What makes this tool unique and easier to use than other platforms is that it automatically incorporates existing conditions such as the slope of the road, the effect of traffic speed, and interactions with crossings, parked cars, etc., into its calculations. Now I will go over 2 examples of projects that we use the tool for. The Taylor Yard Bridge opened 1 year ago, linking Elysian Valley, Frogtown, to Cypress Park across the LA River. This project has a long history stemming from community activists who advocated for the linkage as an environmental justice mitigation stemming from the high levels of air pollutants as a result of the Metrolink facility. The new connection connects 2 neighborhoods across the Los Angeles River, creating a safe connection point for people walking or biking. While other bridges exist in neighboring communities, they are far apart, and the experience crossing them on foot or bike is stressful. For this connectivity analysis, we decided to see how access to the total number of jobs improved for people biking to the new bridge would change. We created an analysis tracking how job access improved at points near the bridge. We first drew the bridge, which is the dark blue line you see on the map. The reddish/purplish area represents areas people using bicycles would reach within a 30-minute distance prior to the bridge opening. The blue shaded area represents the areas reachable within a 30-minute bike ride after the bridge was constructed. The addition of areas south and west of the bridge near Silver Lake means that from that point on the map, a person could reach more than 2,000 jobs using a bike for a 30-minute commute than without the bridge present. This is a similar example of how connectivity for someone riding a bike improved, but in this map, the starting point is in Frogtown on the other side of the river. Similarly, the findings show that people starting their bike ride at this point can now reach over 2,000 more jobs than before the bridge was built. And then this is a slightly different type of analysis, which shows who got the most improved access to jobs within a 30-minute bike commute. This analysis essentially displays what the last 2 analyses portrayed, but asks a question across the entire LA region and compares what jobs access would be like before and after the bridge opened. Clearly, those who live by the bridge are on average able to access thousands of more jobs within a 30-minute bike ride distance. While we ran this analysis after the bridge was built, this is an example of how these sorts of analysis can help define who benefits from infrastructure projects while they are still under consideration. Now, I will talk about another example. To help provide more data-driven narratives to transportation grant applications, we use a connectivity platform to evaluate the benefits of 9 active transportation projects for which the City of LA was seeking funding from the Active Transportation Program in spring 2022. The City of LA worked on the Wilmington Safe Streets project, which aims to improve safety and access for people walking and biking. Our connectivity analysis shows how the project will improve access to schools, parks, and jobs. We're happy to share the good news. The project was awarded $32 million in funding, and we like to think the data that we were able to assist with was part of the reason it scored so well. So I'm now going to dive into the analysis. This analysis depicts the change in connectivity that the project would bring. In this case, the project would improve access to a school by bike. So those dots you see on the screen are students. We consider population by age, specifically looking at children who were 17 and younger. The blue area depicts the areas that will be within a 30-minute bike ride once a project is built. Simply put, as part of the grant application, we were able to show how many more children will have access to the school if the project is funded. Similarly, this analysis depicts how much access would be improved for people walking to a park. The blue area depicts the areas that will be within a 30-minute walk once the project is built, and how many more people will have access based on the population in the area. The dots represent population. We were able to show that more people will have access to the park now. The connectivity platform is a powerful analysis tool that allows us to measure access from a certain point to nearby opportunities like schools, jobs, and parks. With this new tool, we are able to make data-informed decisions for many of the programs LADOT runs, such as transit operations and capital investment planning, active transportation and Vision Zero corridor investments, and micromobility such as bike sharing, car share, network expansion. This tool is powerful because it allows us to better understand and represent actual project benefits to communities. This is important data that we can include in other public engagement presentations, in our discussions with council offices, and in our grant funding applications. And that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, you can contact me at my email. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Recognizing Conveil in some of those figures. That's a platform that we find to be very useful here at SSTI. I'd like to invite the presenters to turn the cameras back on and come off mute. We have a couple of questions I think we have time for. So the first one I'd like to ask is whether you have advice for those who want to begin using accessibility analysis at their agency. What level of expertise is required? Is it helpful to have GIS specialists on hand? And then as a continuation, do you recommend particular platforms? We've seen a couple of different ones here today, and there have been questions about Esri products versus open source, and we've seen Conveil. Whoever would like to start tackling that question?
Well, Bert, you can chime in here too. I think one of the reasons that we went with an Esri-based product rather than, like I said, a built-in. First, we wanted something that was more customizable than some of the Conveil or Sugar Cube or some of these other programs that was a little harder to customize the back end. And then we wanted to use something that was accessible. So the hope was that local communities, other agencies could use our tool if they were looking at land use decisions or transportation decisions. And for us, the easiest way for that to happen was using a tool that most other planners or engineers or state agency staff have available. And that's generally speaking in our area, Esri products. So that's why we built ours based on an Esri platform instead of going completely open source.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. I mean, I think that another issue is the accessibility of the important data layers that you need to do an accessibility analysis, or maybe the amenities that you might consider. And so I just think to wrangle that data, good data that's for your region or community, I think you do probably need to coordinate with someone who's got a GIS background and a knowledge of sort of how a lot of these key data sets are compiled and maintained locally. I just think there's a big advantage in working with data sets that, if they're available, that you can control and manipulate and upkeep yourself.
Yeah, I really liked Bert, I really liked your the triangle. I think that really nicely encapsulates sort of what my experience has been, where you can get something that's lightweight, or you can get something that's accurate, or you get something that's cheap, but you can't have all of them. We started out using our travel model, which is, we already have it, but it's very coarse. It's really not usable for it's not going to show any difference for like smaller but really important and meaningful bike and ped projects. So we wanted something more granular. We tried Sugar Access. The challenge with Sugar Access is that it's very clunky to use and to code projects into, and it takes a long time to do an accessibility analysis. And then from there we moved into, we explored like the network analyst, and I think it's really impressive the amount that you guys have been able to do in-house. It's quite a lot. But there are a couple of functionality pieces like that come really nicely out of the box, which is with Conveil, which is what we've recently acquired. And it conveils that nice mix of it's somewhat configurable, but it's really fast. It comes with a lot of what we want out of the box, but it also isn't cheap either. So I guess maybe to kind of, for advice, I would say, think about like how granular or accurate you need to be, what functionality do you want, and then think about how much you're kind of willing to spend for that.
We have another question. It's something of a data question. You use points of interest for some of your analyses, and in some cases you have to sort of categorize them. The first part of the question is, how do you categorize your points of interest? How do you aggregate them in a way that's helpful? And then when you're analyzing the access that is available to certain communities, what parameters do you use to sort of define those communities?
Was that referring kind of to the community types and PPA in the presentation that I gave, or was that one of WFRC's?
I think it could be fairly general. I think this person may be interested in environmental justice type work or underserved communities.
Let's see. For us, it was really, at least for our the examples I showed, it's really based on geography. So it's if somebody physically resides in an area designated as an environmental justice area, then if a project increases accessibility for a geography, then everybody in that area is considered as, you know, a disadvantaged population. That's not perfect, right? Because there are a lot of non-disadvantaged people that live in disadvantaged areas and vice versa. But it's if we say that a project increases or decreases accessibility for environmental justice communities, it means that for just the physical areas that have been designated as disadvantaged areas, that's where you saw the change.
I'll chime in. I think that you know, figuring out what amenities you want to count, I think, is actually a really important discussion to have. And we've had that. We've got similar criteria to SACOG for prioritizing our short range transportation project programming. And you know, after having those conversations, we settled on schools, transit stations, community centers, grocery stores, and healthcare facilities. And you know, we excluded things like sometimes you see like coffee shops and restaurants, and you know, like the list of amenities could go on and on. Oh, and I should mention parks also, but you got to draw the line someplace. And I think that keeping the list small but representative of things that people have an ongoing need to access is really important.
I would also point out for the the amenities, there's lots of examples of how you can give different weights to different kinds of amenities. So like you might give a higher weight to a grocery store than, say, a restaurant. And you also, sometimes you can cap the number of amenities. So you could say if a project, it makes it so you can go from 0 grocery stores and now you can get to 1 grocery store, that's much more meaningful than if you have access to 8 grocery stores and a project allows you to reach a 9th grocery store. If you look at Virginia DOT's Smart Scale documentation, they're just one example, but they're an example of where they did a lot of looking at those details of what non-work destinations to include, what weights to give to each non-work destination, and also sort of caps at which you no longer count accessibility benefits.
Great, thanks. I think we have time for one more quick question. And I think the industry's been very focused on congestion-oriented metrics for quite a long time. What's the biggest hurdle you see for accessibility becoming more of a mainstream metric?
I just think it's the immediacy of people's feelings when they're in a congested situation, right? It's like something should just make this go away versus, well, it's a bummer that I have to travel like, 25 miles to get where I'm going. I think that's for me, that's the biggest barrier, is that like we are sort of emotional reaction when we're faced with frustrating situations is to think very sort of short range in terms of how things can be made better.
I agree with Bert. I a few years ago, somebody tried to explain it to our SACOG's board of directors, and it's not as intuitive as, somebody says how many places you can get to. People kind of can think about it, but you don't feel it in the same way that you feel traffic congestion. So I don't have an answer to it, but I would like to think that just more exposure over time would increase acceptance of it.
But I also think we're conditioned to think, oh, if there's congestion here, the solution is widening, and that's a really easy thing for the general population to accept, even though it shouldn't be, because sometimes that widening has like really big impacts on the community that exists. Whereas some of the solutions for access opportunity, if you're sitting there in traffic thinking, oh, why couldn't I have gone to a store closer to me, means that you also have to buy into the fact that our communities need to be more mixed use. We need to have, more convenience closer to our homes. That might mean that we have to get away from traditional single family zoning. So I think some of the access opportunities allows us to have a broader conversation, and the conversation that I think a lot of people aren't used to having or accepting different solutions, or besides just like, a new road or a wider road can help solve me getting 25 miles faster.
Yeah, I'd like to add that historically we've evaluated projects based on their impact on travel times, and only recently we have evaluated them based on vehicle miles traveled. So it's a shift in thinking on, like, instead of focusing our transportation on impacts of congestion, it's more like, well, what's the environmental impact of air pollution, my increase in access to destinations. So it's an entire shift of mindset that we're moving towards.
Well, with that, I think we'll wrap. Thanks once again to all of our presenters today. And I'd also like to thank Megan Link and Chris McCahill from SSTI who are working behind the scenes. Keep a lookout for future SSTI webinars, and we'll see you next time.